This episode of the Fiction Writers Podcast is brought to you by the Novel Notebook. With each character and each setting, hundreds of details must be compiled and organized. Far too many for a writer, like you, to keep them cataloged in your brain. The Novel Notebook provides the answer. Visit www.fictionwriterspodcast.com/novel and quickly discover how to organize your materials and take your novel to the next level. Welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana Mcara, where you will discover tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Here you'll find new energy, new perspectives, new resources, and new ideas that will spark your creativity into a blaze of brilliance. It's easier than you think. Be sure you visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, get out your notebook, tune in, and let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast, tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Today, I am delighted to welcome to the podcast Terry Shepard. Now, Terry is a personal friend of mine. We don't live very far apart. We both go to the same Sisters in Crime group. So I am really looking forward to this interview today. Terry is the author of the Jessica Ramirez Thrillers and the COVID-19 children's classic, Juliet and the Mystery Bug, which I've seen that book. It's to help children understand about wearing masks and all that. Terry's short stories have been published in a number of anthologies, and he wrote the nonfiction classic, How to Be a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. He's also a prolific book narrator and owns a publishing company. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Focused on helping indie authors get their stories into wide circulation. He lives and writes on the ocean in Jacksonville, Florida, which is my greater hometown too. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you so much, Lana. It's great to be with you.
I'm excited about our talk because we have such great conversations. We should be recording more of them. So let's start off with the basics. So you are a corporate executive. You have done broadcasting. You've done so many things. You're an entrepreneur. Why novels?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, Lana. This is my 6th reinvention. I thought I wanted to be a rock and roll star, so I played the drums and toured with a band for a while when I was in high school, and then radio was my way out of introversion. I'm an introvert like most of us writers, and I figured that I would never, ever get a girlfriend or a job or be able to support my family unless I learned how to be able to project a meaningful personality to the world. And radio was the entryway to that for me. It was great because I really didn't have to look at anybody. I just kind of thought about whoever I was in love with at that moment and talked just to them one-on-one. And that actually became a really important learning experience for me later when I would be talking to 10,000 people, because what I learned was you find the friendly face in the audience. And it was the same way when I was writing. I started writing nonfiction as a corporate guy, mostly self-help stuff, because I wrote a motivational email to my team when I managed a bunch of people every Sunday. And my admin said, you should put that on the blog. And then another admin that I had later said, there's book material in there. So I have 3 nonfiction books out. The last one of which was called Pass It On. And that was before fiction, but I came to fiction because I could no longer be a corporate executive. I came to that time, we all come to that time in your life when, I won't say age discrimination, because I don't feel like that's what it was, but just the need for proximity to our kids and grandkids who all lived in Jacksonville brought me back down here. I had been gone from Jacksonville for 14 years, came back and didn't know what to do. And there's nothing worse than a life without purpose. And as a corporate guy, my purpose was, I knew the moment I became a white guy with power and authority that I wanted to bust the doors down for women, minorities, and the disabled. And that's what I did. That was my joy, much more so than the money I earned or the goals that I achieved in the corporate world. was finding people with potential of every shape and size and opening the door so that they could grab the brass ring. And that, I think, has been what I hope will be my legacy, is that generation or two of women, minorities, and people with disabilities that found their way to the upper echelons of power because somebody believed in them. And as I was talking with my shrink about that when I moved back to Jacksonville, because I was highly depressed, she said, well, why don't you try doing that in the world of fiction? Make your stars those same people. And, don't worry the fact that you're going to get hit from some people who are saying, what's a white guy doing writing minorities? But, we all eventually write killers in our stories at some point too, and we're not those people. So that's what I ended up doing, and that was 5 years ago.
And you've written how many books since then?
10. Yeah, I have the 5th Jessica Ramirez book, The Innocent, is about 2/3 of the way done. I have 4 more out there. Started out with Chasing Vega, then Chasing the Captain, then Chasing Karma. Transference was the book 4, kind of slipped out of the timeline, the Jessica timeline a little bit. And then The Innocent actually introduces a PI who looks more like me, but Jess is very much part of the story. So it's in her metaverse, in her world. And then along the way, there have been other books. Of course, Juliet and the Mystery Bug is the one I never expected to write. My grandkids came up to us and said, we're terrified about this COVID stuff. What does it mean? And because I had a background with connections into Centers for Disease Control, and I was able to contact Dr. Fauci, we tried to write something that was as scientifically correct as it could be, but we wrote it in the language of Dr. Seuss, and it had pictures in it. And I remembered, as you probably do, we can quote verbatim from Green Eggs and Ham all these years later. And I figured I'll write it like that so that the children will be able to remember and repeat. And that's the biggest complaint that I have right now, is from parents who've read the book 30 times to their kids and have said, I'm so sick of it because I've memorized it too. But you know what? That turned out to be the objective. They now know. They can recite exactly the right way to wash their hands, mask, about social distancing. And it was the first book that really explained the DNA version of vaccines in a way that a 5-year-old could understand. And so Colleen and I are proud of that. We wrote that one together, and it still sells. So that's kind of how things started. And then I was interested in short stories, so I wrote a few of those to see if I could do it. And, I'm fooling around with screenplays now, so we'll see where it goes.
Wow. Well, hats off to you to be able to go from novels to short stories, because that is not a leap I've ever been able to do.
Yeah,
it's different. Too much story.
Yeah, it's different. It really is. And it's a whole different part of the art, but that's what fascinates me. I think about life and everything that I've done is kind of like a board game. And you have to learn the rules of how to compete effectively and have fun playing the game. Mm-hmm. And that was what I did at the beginning of my writing career. Was I made a list of the 4 authors that at that time were my heroes and heroines, and I wrote them fan letters. I said, I'm not a fanboy. I'm not looking for a mentor. I'm 65 and I'm starting to write fiction. What's one piece of advice you'd give me? And as was the case with you, everybody that I met along the way responded in much greater detail and became my friends and read my stuff, gave me great feedback. And I realized that this was a community in which I wanted to continue to live, and a community that I enjoyed. Gave me a fresh purpose, and I'm having a blast.
Yeah, that's really where it's at, isn't it? That you are enjoying your life. This is something you can have fun doing.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up on a family of preachers and teachers, and I was the oddball because I kind of went into business. But we all have a flock, right? I mean, we were put on this earth for a reason, and that was to make it a little bit better than we found it. Just one simple way of defining it.
Yes.
And I think my grandfather, the Methodist minister, wherever he may be, if there is some place that they go, I hope he's smiling down on me, because that's what I do in this world now.
Yes, yes, absolutely. When you spoke at the Sisters in Crime meeting, which is where we met, you spoke about how can you write a main character who is a Latina and she's a PI. How can you do that and actually be authentic? So
You
how
know,
do you do it?
it's really interesting, Lana. In the time since I spoke to our group, I've done more thinking about that. And if you think about it, there are commonalities that all great characters share, regardless of their background or their culture. And those are the things that attract us as readers to love them, because the story is almost secondary. When we think about the great characters that are out there, the Philip Marlowes, the Stephanie Plums of the world, we love those people, and we love them for their flaws, and we love them for their tenacity and the many great things that build them. And those are similar no matter who you are. So that was something that kind of was a revelation for me between the time that I spoke to our group and last Saturday I was in St. Augustine giving the same speech, and I incorporated that into it. And there was also another exercise that I did that I found very interesting, and that is that nowadays when I give this speech, I take a piece of paper, and half of the paper has a picture of a character on it throughout the diversity of the spectrum of humanity. And I tell the people that are in my audience to draw a description of that character, create that character in words below the picture. Then what we do is we rip the picture off the top and we swap it. And we see if we can write 1,000 words with that picture of the character, but with the definitions that we've created for someone else below it. Because what makes people interesting is how different they may be from our expectations. And that's one of the things that I discovered when I did my research, because I'm very much into immersion. So if there's a new character that I'm bringing into the story, I first try and find a friend or make a friend who looks like that, who lives in that body, and to spend enough time walking side by side with them, with their families, to try and understand their upbringing and their experience. And one of the things that I find is they're all unique. Even Jess is based on a real life cop that's a friend of mine. But even she says, the other women that I've connected you with, that you've written with, are they at all like me? They're women. A couple of them were Latina, but we're all unique. So the adventure for me is to try to figure out how to fully paint this portrait of a fascinating character that will resonate with the audience. But the learning for me is that there's so much more that we as human beings share in common, and we can help each other regardless of what our backgrounds are. We all have secrets, painful secrets that other people don't know about. We all have strengths. We all have challenges. And part of our role as friends, colleagues, coworkers, whatever, is to help each other become the best possible human beings we can be. And so that's the way I enter the storytelling. I try and create heroes and even villains. My favorite type of villains are the people that are doing the wrong things for the right reasons. But for my heroes, I try and write them in such a way so that somebody can look at them and say, I look like that person. Maybe I can become that person. And if I get an email that says, I want to grow up to be like Jess, that's worth more than 1,000 sales to me.
Yes, exactly. I always think about Jennifer Lopez when I think about a woman that, and now your main character is a private investigator, not a policeman, right?
Jessica is a detective. She's
actually a detective.
Yeah, she's a 10-year veteran of the police force. Tracy, her real life counterpart, had a 25-year career and now is a consultant, a cop consultant.
Okay.
But all the way through, Jess has been a lone wolf because she's in a highly patriarchal police force in the fictional city of Paloma, Illinois. Everybody wants her to fail. they put her with a partner who's also a woman so that the guys wouldn't have to work with her. And she's had to learn how to succeed and do the right thing in this environment. And that's part of what fascinates me about her character.
Yes, yes. So, well, I thought she was a private eye. I'm so sorry about that.
Well, if you read the last book that's before Transference, the one that's last in the timeline, her last lines, the last pages are her saying, "Look, I've had enough. They win. I quit. I've had enough." Mm-hmm. And what everybody wants to know is, will she? What will happen to her? Because she's a very local police officer, but she is dragged into these worldwide James Bond-esque kinds of things that start in her community, but end up taking her all over the world. And that was kind of a necessity just to keep reader attention, from the writer perspective. If she's hanging from the London Eye Ferris wheel in beautiful downtown London in the UK, that's much more interesting than chasing a guy and trying to do a pit maneuver on, I-4 or something like that. So that's how the story's developed. And I don't know where they're going to go, but that's what makes it fun for me.
That's what makes it fun for everybody. Yeah, for sure. I love your style. It is a film noir type of Raymond Chandler type of style, which is amazing. I really do enjoy it.
Thank you. And that's just because I'm lazy. And I'm listening to Jukebox Chandelier. I think that's what it is. It's a James Lee Burke novel, and I'm listening to it being narrated to me in an audiobook format as I drive around. And he is so good. He can paint a scene with such beauty and such precision and amazing words. I wish I had that gift. But what I kind of realized early on was at this late stage of my life, I had to learn how to tell stories that people could get connected with fast, that at the end of every chapter, Dan Brown told me, always leave them with a cliffhanger in every chapter. And so that's what they are. They're popcorn books. They're the kind of books you can read on an airplane. And that's what I was aiming for. So if the muse occasionally sings and gives me some more poetic, exposition or dialogue, I feel like I've been blessed with that. But I just try and get the story told and make it fun.
Yes, I do much the same thing. I don't write that type of book. I write more cozy mysteries, but also to the point and short descriptions and short sentences and the same type of thing, because I want to tell the story. I don't want to be there with flowery words and long, expositions and all that. I just like the story. That's why I'm there.
Yeah, I so love the cozy genre. I love reading your stuff, and there's probably a dozen authors of cozies that I have in my bookshelf precisely for that reason, because it reminds me of a lot of the stuff that we used to watch on TV. The Murder, She Wrote things that were so much a part of my earlier adulthood when I still watched a little bit of TV. And sometimes the thing about those things was Lee Goldberg told me, whoever the first person is the star that you see on screen is the one who gets killed. That's the one. And then the second person is the one that did it, right? And the fun part, like with your stuff, the fun part of the thing I love about reading your stories is, how are we going to get to that point where your protagonist actually figures things out? That is what the adventure is. And I think no matter what your genre is, even if it's romance, how are they going to get together? That's why we keep turning the pages.
Right. Narrative drive, that curiosity of, I got to find out what happened. And I have read books where I kept turning pages at 2:00 in the morning thinking, this book is awful. Why do I keep reading it? And then I turn the page because narrative drive, is pretty much everything.
That is so true. I mean, one of my favorite authors is a woman named Marie Sutro, and she writes this the mystery that's very dark, almost horror stuff. And that's not my thing. Jennifer Ann Gordon's another one who writes that very, very well. As a genre, I would never, ever go to the bookstore and buy it, but these are my friends, and I love to read what my friends write. And what I found was that they are both so good at that narrative drive that even if you don't like the genre or you're grossed out by what's going on, you can't stop. You got to keep going.
Yeah, that's what we live for, actually. So where do you get your ideas?
It's where do they come from? So I'm not really sure. I kind of try and think about, I don't even know how the ending's going to be usually when I start things out. I'm very much a pantser. And with Vega started out just with a meth bust that went bad. And then she got suspended, and then to figure out, well, where does she go? How far away can I throw her? So I ended up throwing her out. One of my favorite places to visit is the Grand Canyon. I knew a little bit about that. So I sent her out there. I figured out, okay, Coconino County is where the Grand Canyon is. How are they set up cop-wise out there? What's the interaction between the sheriff and the rangers, the National Park Service? And that began my research, and the story kind of developed. Captain, the second book in the series, which is probably the most popular, that began as a short story. And I hired a woman to narrate it just for my website. And as she was reading it, the rest, I felt, well, okay, what happens? What would happen now? What's the setup? It was, the short story was about Jessica being forced by her chief to go to Nashville to witness an execution in the electric chair of a guy that she arrested on her first day on the job. She caught a fleeing suspect, convicted suspect who had escaped from prison on her first day on the job. And 10 years later, or 5 years maybe, I can't remember where in her timeline that happened, but they make her go down to watch the execution. And he tells her, she walks the Green Mile with it behind him, and he says to her, I think maybe it's even earlier than that, when she arrests him, he says, I'm sorry I led you on this chase. I'm wanted in Nashville for murder, but always be careful, because what you see isn't necessarily what happened. And that she can't get that out of her mind. And when the short story ended, I'm thinking, what if that went someplace else? What if he was set up? And then you start thinking about who might have set him up. Is it a bad organization? Is it a good organization? So I love it when the good guys make bad decisions. So I made it, his wife was an FBI informant and put in the witness protection program. And she got discovered by her real husband. So they had to dispatch her. So what they did was they set him up. They made it seem like he killed her, even though he didn't. And Jess finds this out, and then she's got to go sort it out. So then things, you're a creative, Lana. This works. You just kind of imagine, okay, what if I took my Legos and built it this way? And then you start it, and you go down one rabbit hole. And you say, nah, I don't like that. Let me try another. And it just kind of happens. And then you throw, as Joseph W. Walker, probably the greatest, most prolific short story writer working today, says, you put these characters together and get them talking to each other, and then things start to happen, and you just let it go.
Yes, you put the wheels in motion and see where that engine is going to take you. Yeah. I remember one book I was writing that the guy had brought the girl home. She was out of town. He rescued her and brought her back to her house, which was, a ways away, quite a ways away. And I wanted him to stay in town because there was more things for them to do together. But every time I came to it, he was going to leave. Well, if she does this, he's going to leave. Well, if he does that, he's still going to leave. How can I get him to stay in town? I need him to stay in town. And I'm like, going to have to shoot him. That's the only thing to do. I'm going to have to shoot him.
Well, and sometimes they got to leave. I mean, you got to follow where they take you. I mean, one of the commonalities I hear from the authors that I interview are that their characters talk to them. They'll be in the car, and all of a sudden their characters will start arguing with them about the way that they're painting their personalities or whatever. And I've actually talked to my psychiatrist about this, and she said that is actually a sign of very good mental health, when you're able to have those kind of conversations with the voices. that talk to you from wherever they're talking to you from. And what are you learning? Because there's something autobiographical, or like they say, most relationships start because of something that's unresolved earlier in your life. And that's part of, I think, the journey of discovery for us as writers is, what are we taking away for ourselves out of these stories? How can it make us more self-aware and become better human beings? And that's been the unexpected kind of pleasure of this, is I'll go back and look at the books at the end after they're all, they're out and about and I'm listening to the narration, and I'll say, wow, okay, now I understand a little bit more about where that is. And sometimes, maybe this is the case for you, sometimes that spawns the next tale.
Yes. While I'm writing one book, I've got my eye on the events to see how I can introduce a character or bring a thread or something that could come in the next book. My first book caught me flat-footed. I was not prepared to write a second book after my first book. But there was so much fan mail that I had to write a second book. They were begging me for another.
True, isn't it? I mean, I never would have taken Jess to London, but she had, I created a Twitter presence for her. I made it very clear she was a fictional person, but her personality was so powerful that people didn't believe it. And she developed this following in the UK. She had 2 marriage proposals from cops in the UK, which I thought was, I wrote to him and I said, my name is Terry Shepard. I wrote Jessica Ramirez. She's fake. Thank you very much for your affection for her. And one guy said, that's okay. Just give me her email address. I want to interact with her. And that's kind of when I started thinking about taking her off of social media, which I finally did. But just like you said, Lana, I mean, your readers often give you the best ideas. And for me to take her to the UK turned out to be a huge gift. I mean, I'm very proud of that story because of the twists and turns that are there. The other thing that I love to do is I always have Easter eggs where I put my friends. I give my friends characters in the story. And in Captain, the head of MI6 is a buddy of mine from when I was working in Michigan, who has lived his entire life in a wheelchair. His autobiography is My Life in an Electric Chair. And I figured, well, I'm going to give him a cameo. I wrote to him, I said, can I give you a cameo as the number 2 person at MI6 in London? But his character spoke to me so powerfully that he ended up owning the second and third acts of this thing. He ended up coming up with a plan that sent Jess and her team into Moscow to find the guy they were looking for. And that happens, so it is fun to point these people. I always go to them and say, hey, can I use your name? Here's what you're going to be. Do you want to be a good guy or a bad guy? I just love to get that. And I put them in there. And that's fun, because that also is helpful to me, because if they're my friends, I already kind of know a little bit about them. And I know some of their personality traits, and I can inject those into the story. And that is always fun, especially when you're taking a hockey coach and making him a secret agent, or one of your ham radio buddies, you have him running a computer lab at the University of Illinois. Those things, that's they like it. I like it. It's a win-win.
Yes, I do that with my sister. My sister is a very smart woman. She's got 2 master's degrees. She's been a therapist for 15 years. She's got all this going on. But she gets in scrapes. It's almost like she's got DNA to get herself into these situations. They're hysterically funny and bizarre. And
that's great.
She my books to see what I did, if she's in this one or not. And then she said, you killed me. You killed me off. In one of them.
Sometimes we have to do that. That's the hardest part, is when you got to kill your favorites.
Yeah.
But they all have a time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a publishing house. Tell us a little bit about that. What does it entail?
Yeah. Lana, I think you probably would agree with me that, as John Lennon said, life is what happens when we make other plans.
Yeah.
And originally, Colleen and I started Ramirez and Clark, which were my two characters, Jessica Ramirez and Alexander Clark, as a publishing house to own the copyrights in case something happened to me. We set it up so everything would pass on to the kids and all that stuff. But what I discovered was, especially since from the beginning, I refused. My sister was the publicist for one of the big five, so I knew enough about how that worked to know that I didn't want to be involved in that at all. I didn't want to be begging for an agent who would be telling me what to do. I wanted to pick my own editors, and I wanted to control my own marketing. So I decided to be an indie for all the ups and downs that are associated with that from the beginning. So I had to learn. I had to learn how to navigate KDP and Ingram Spark and BookBaby and Lulu, and I had to learn how to market. I had to learn how to format manuscripts. I had to learn how to build chemistry with an editor and find one that would work with me and could understand my voice and who could teach me. So I did that. I made all the mistakes you could make. I made every single one of them. But what happened was that other people, as they find out that that's what you know how to do, they come to you and they say, well, how did you find your cover designer? Well, I know like 10 of them. And, how'd you find your editor and how do you format a manuscript? I don't know how to do that. So I started saying, look, I'll help make sure that your cover graphic fits the KDP requirements. I got Photoshop. I'll make that work for you. Or I've got the software to turn your Word doc into a print-ready manuscript. I can do that. And one of my author buddies, who is now my business manager, said, you need to start charging for this. So we made a rate card and put it on the Ramirez and Clark page. And what's happened is I've morphed from doing a lot of that stuff to actually, basically, I have a Rolodex of people that I hand it off to now because I'm not really that interested in the transactional activity of turning somebody's Word document into a manuscript that can be printed either digitally or in paperback. I know how to do that. I've learned how to do that. So I'm not interested in that anymore, but I know people who do. So what I do is I just say, hey, listen, how about I send you some clients? And they like it. So Ramirez and Clark has kind of become this central curation of talent, of people that I know and trust and would recommend. And so when somebody needs something, I point them in that direction. I still do some stuff for my friends. And that's how the narration started, was that when I was doing the author interviews, I would say, Lana Mcara is our guest today, and let's hear the first couple of stanzas of her latest book. And I would read them on the podcast. And what happened one day was one of my guests said, can we stop the recording for a minute? Because I want to talk with you about reading my book. And I'd never done it. I mean, I was a radio guy, so I kind of knew a little bit about how to do that. But narration is a very different experience. I'm very thankful that my mother read to me when I was a kid, because she was a beautiful narrator. Even though she didn't know it, she was amazing. So I learned from the best at a very young age. And I did the first one for free. The second one I did very inexpensively. And now I'm up to 27 and climbing. And once I knew that was what I wanted to do, I did another thing, and this is kind of how we got to be friends. I recognized very early on in our relationship that you are one of the smartest people out there in this space, not just from a creation perspective, because you've got the goods, but you're also a brilliant marketer who knows how to execute very well. So when Colleen and I were driving back from the library at Ponte Vedra, I was saying, I got to get together with Lana because there's some things that we can do to help each other, and I can learn something from her. So that's my secret. I try and find the smartest people that are doing what I want to do and find a way to add value in their lives so that they'll help me. And that's what I did with narration. I became friends with Andy Arndt and Scott Brick, two of the most successful and well-known award-winning narrators working today. And both of them have been incredibly helpful, not just teaching me about the actual craft of narration, but about the business behind it, right? How do you charge? How do you set up the contracts? What's in the contracts? That kind of stuff. And that's why I hired my friend, Carrie Schaefer, Carrie Ann King is her pen name, to be my business manager, because I pay her to do all that back office stuff. I say yes to everybody. If somebody wants to do something with me, I'm happy to do it. Then I say, I'm going to send you to Carrie and she'll work out the details and she'll tell me when we can pull the trigger. And she's the one that says, okay, here's what it's going to cost. She has the bad cop conversations. And it's great because she loves doing that. I pay her very well for that. I get my money's worth from it. And I can concentrate then on the stuff that I like to do and that I'm good at. And I think that's the biggest challenge, like for us as indies, right? Is that we have to do everything. Not only do we have to write great stories, but as you well know, we've got to figure out how to get them into the format the audience can read. We have to figure out who the audience is, where they are, and how we engage them in that space. And that is outside of the comfort zone of a lot of writers.
Yes, it is. And you have just encapsulated why so many writers are so overwhelmed with the writing life, because the book is only one piece of this big puzzle.
Yeah. Well,
Book, but
it really isn't the book. I mean, that's the thing that when somebody says they want to do what I do, right? I tell them it's not going to be the book. I mean, the book becomes secondary. The book is like merchandise. It's like the hats and stuff we sell. What you have to figure out is what is going to be your primary connection with the audience. And this is one of the things that I love about you and that I'm learning from you is that your major gift to the universe is that you're creating more artists. In the classes you teach, when you teach people like me how to take a book from ideation to publication to success, that is, to me, probably, I mean, I don't know how your economics work, but I think that's probably one of the niches where you find the best cash flow for your time. And the nice thing about doing a teaching thing is you can record it once and then play it back and just jump on when you're doing the one-on-ones or the group sessions. So it's very efficient. But everybody's got to find that secondary thing, the reason that people would want to come see them. And then what happens is, like I go out and speak about, white guys writing the diverse character topic is very popular right now. So I speak a lot about that. The other thing is being a podcast guest. I mean, I wrote the podcast guest book because I spoke to so many Sisters in Crime chapters on Zoom about it, because I know how to do that. I've done over probably close to 2,000 interviews, and I've been podcasting since 2009, and have done 167 authors so far, interviewed them. And there are commonalities on both the hosting side as far as the questions you ask and how you do it. And there are a lot of commonalities on what it takes to be a great podcast guest. So those are the things that have kind of been come associated with the Terry Shepard brand. But I always have the books there. I take them wherever I go. I have special editions. You've heard this story. I have special editions that I take on airplanes, little ones, pocketbooks, for the flight attendants. And that's a marketing expense. I give those away to the flight attendants. And on the first page, it thanks them for the hard work that they do. And here's a little gift from an author for you, because I know you told me you like to read. All I ask is that you give me an honest review on Amazon and that you hand the book to somebody else. And I can trace sales to those books. Whenever I fly, there is always a bump in sales when I come back from those trips. And it's cheap. To get a pocketbook printed, I have my first 2 Jess novels is in a flight attendant edition. And it costs maybe $6 to do it, $8. I print them through Lulu. Great quality, incredible quality. And I think about that in terms of a marketing expense. I'm not trying to think about making money back. And that's another thing that I've added to my speech since you and I were together was some immense wisdom that I got from author Dennis Palumbo. And pardon me for rambling on here, but Dennis is well known for writing a film that you may remember starring Peter O'Toole called My Favorite Year, one of my all-time favorite films. Mm-hmm. And he was in the writing room. He wanted to get a job as a writer for television. So he figured out where the television writers and showrunners were they were looking for the next stars in the comedy club. So he decided to become a stand-up comic. And he was very funny. But Gabe Kaplan came to him after one of his shows and he says, you're really funny, but you're a lousy stand-up comic. how'd you like to write for this show that I just got on ABC? It's going to be called Welcome Back, Kotter. So he was one of the chief writers for Welcome Back, Kotter for the next 7 years, at which point he decided to become a psychotherapist because that had always been a fascination for him. He specializes in creatives. He's done it for 30 years. And I asked him, two things. I said, what kind of people come to you and what are their issues? And he says, I have, Academy Award winners, Grammy Award winners. I have so many fascinating creatives, and they all have the same issues we all have: writer's block, procrastination, that kind of stuff. And then I said, well, what do you tell them? Where do we go from here? How do we figure this out? And he said, you got to stop thinking about the outcome and focus on the experience. Because as you and I know, Lana, the joy of writing is when the muse is singing and you can't get it down on the keyboard fast enough.
Yeah.
When you get that email from somebody that says, your cozy character, I can't wait for the next book because I love her. She reminds me of, right? Something like that. Whenever I heard from a kid who says she wants to grow up to be like Jess, that's worth $1 million to me. And what I've figured out in my own life is that money follows passion. And happiness is the intersection between purpose, passion, and talent. And if you can find that in your life, you're done. You don't have to do anything else. I mean, the problem is it continues to evolve, right? I mean, what is important to you now is way different than it was 25 years ago. And we have to adjust because that little intersection is always changing. But to be thinking about the process as the thing, the process is the joy of creation. And not whether or not you're going to get published, whether or not you're going to get an agent, whether or not you're going to sell a zillion books or it's going to turn into a TV series. If those things happen, that's just a side benefit. And then a lot of guys tell me it's a pain in the neck, right? It's because it adds a whole new dimension of time that you don't have for stuff that you need to do. When I talk with Megan Abbott about, her one of her books was made into a TV series, and I talked to her and she says, I'm exhausted. I'm flying between here and Vancouver for the shoot. They don't even have time to write. And what Dennis Palumbo's takeaway is something that I now incorporate into all of my speeches. And that is, it's not the outcome, it's the process. And finding a way to immerse yourself in something that's joyful to you is where it's at. And you need to do that every day.
Yes, that is so true. No matter what you're doing, whether you're writing or working in the yard or whatever.
Yeah. That is exactly right. That's exactly right. And another lesson that I learned in that, I learned from my granddaughter, our granddaughter, Juliet, who's the star of Juliet and the Mystery Bug, came to us with Down syndrome. And I believe that at age of 7, oftentimes she's the smartest person in the room. And it's our job to decode that wisdom. She lives in the moment. Whenever I see her, I say, tell me about your day, because we're trying to teach her to build her memory banks and her ability to articulate stuff. And I'll say, tell me what happened at camp. And she's not interested in that. She's only interested in what we're going to do right now. Let's go play with a dog. I got the ball. Let's play catch. Those kind of things. What she's in the now. And, we spend all this money on Eckhart Tolle books about how to find their way into the now. And that's where she lives. So whenever I'm with her, I want her to tell me what's going on in her day, because, she'll have good days and bad days. And we taught her not to call them bad days, good days and rough days, because there are no bad days. They're good days and they're rough days. And she gets graded every day at school on whether it's been a good day or a bad day. But she'll tell me what it is, and I'll try and figure out why, what was so good about it or what was so rough about it, because that's the plot line for the story, right? But she's not interested in that. She says to me, can I watch YouTube Kids on the way home? Are we going to stop for ice cream? When we get home, can we do this? Can we do that? I got my fingernail paint. Can I do your nails while you're driving? That kind of stuff. She's interested in it now. And that's, if you think about when you're creating or when you're teaching or when you're doing anything, that's where the most fun is. When you're in that zone and things are happening through you, not from you. That's the best part of living. And, the more time you can spend in that place, the better.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Terry, this has been amazing.
I talked too much. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. This has just been absolutely fabulous. I love the conversation. Tell us how to get more from you.
So what I've learned is you put everything. I was lucky enough to be able to get terryshepard.com. So that's my web address, and everything's there. So you can find your way to my Facebook page and my narrations, all my podcast interviews are there, and all the books are there as well. There's links to the Amazon place to get them and all that stuff. So anybody that wants to learn more, terryshepard.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for being with us today. It's been great.
My pleasure, Lana. Thank you. I'm so glad that I met you.
Oh, I am too. We've had some wonderful conversations, and every time we talk, I learn more.
So do I.
Yeah. Amazing. And thank you for being with us today. My name is Lana Mcara. See you next time.
Thank you for tuning into the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana Mcara, where we share tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Remember to visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Fiction Writers Podcast.